Yeah, you.
I know my daughter doesn't like the beard because it's mostly gray, and I told her not to worry. It'll be all gray soon enough.
Mr. Chairman, members of the Planning Commission, we are now live on all channels, and the audience has joined the meeting.
All right, thank you, Josh. We'll get started with this meeting of the Gallatin Planning Commission work session. Let me remind everyone that the purpose of tonight's meeting is just to familiarize the members of the Planning Commission with the items that will be coming before us in a couple of weeks. Tonight does not include public comment, but there will be an opportunity for public comment on items in a couple of weeks when this comes back before us. But no vote will be held tonight on any issue, save one. We will hold a vote to hold this meeting by electronic means. So let me read a quick message. Pursuant to the Governor's Executive Orders number 16, number 34, number 51, number 60, number 65, number 71, and number 78, and the need to limit the community spread of COVID-19, members of the Planning Commission will participate by electronic means, and the meeting will be live streamed to protect the public health, safety, and welfare of the members and citizens of Gallatin. So at this time, we'll take a roll call and combined with a vote for the members of this commission to agree to hold this meeting by electronic means. When your name is called, please respond by answering present and approve. Mary Ann, will you please take the roll call vote?
Chair Pereira.
Approve.
Vice Chair Harris.
Present and approve.
Mr. Wilson.
Present and approve.
Councilwoman Love.
Present and approved.
Dr. Orgain.
Present and approve.
Mr. Strouser.
Present and approve.
Ms. Hibbler. Ms. Hibbler. It's 6-0.
I didn't hear a response. Is Mrs. Hibbler with us this evening?
Mr. Chairman, she is not showing up in the panelist list, but I will send her an email to see if, to make sure she's got the link.
All right. Thank you, Josh. Tonight we have 8 items to review. We'll start off with item number 1, which is Oxford Station Phase 2B, final plat. Jillian, are you presenting this item?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Next slide, please. The applicant requests approval of a final plat for Oxford Station Phase 2B for 57 detached and attached single-family lots. Next slide, please. This subdivision is located south of Highway 386 off of Offutt Drive. All lots will be accessed by private streets. While the plat needs some corrections, the layout and unit count is consistent with the approved FMDP and preliminary plat. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. The only minor change is units 69 to 71 down in the right-hand corner. Were previously included in the next phase, Phase 2C, but since they are attached to 3 other units within Phase 2B, they will also be included in this plat. There are no changes in overall density or layout. Thank you.
Thank you, Jillian. Do we have a representative for the applicant online?
If you are representing this item, if you could use the raise your hand function at the bottom of the screen, it will let me know to unmute your line. I'm looking for someone with Reagan Smith. We've got Ted Stevenson. Ted, your line is unmuted. We also have George Welch. George, your line's unmuted as well. Well,
Are you able to hear me?
Yes, go ahead, Mr. Is this Mr. Welch?
This is George, yes. We're in agreement. We'll work with Jillian to address the comments and don't have any, just here to answer any questions if you have any.
Okay, thank you. This looks like a continuation of what we already have going out there. Jillian, what are the top 5 concerns or issues that you think will be included in staff's comments so that we know what to kind of be looking for?
This is pretty consistent with what's approved right now. The lot lines need to be corrected throughout the plat. Open spaces need to be labeled correctly, and easements and things need to be labeled correctly. But as long as those are updated on the resubmittal, I don't anticipate a big issue for 2 weeks from now.
Very good. So questions or comments from anyone on the commission?
The only question I had is just because I can't remember off the top of my head, what's the required open space requirement for the MRO zoning?
There is not a required open space requirement for MRO zoning, although they do provide a substantial amount of it.
Okay, that's what I just couldn't remember. Thanks. But otherwise, this looks like a continuation of what's already going out there, so I don't see any problems with it.
Yes, 2A is currently under construction and well underway.
Very good. Also, I'm a little late to the game here, but I've discovered with Zoom, it has this handy raise your hand feature. So if you're trying to get my attention, just click the raise the hand bar and it'll show up on the screen. But if there's anyone else, does anyone else have a comment or question? Or you could do this if you want, but okay. All right, well, if none, then we'll see you back in a couple of weeks. It looks pretty procedural. Thank you.
Thank you.
Move on. Okay, well, thank you. We'll move on to item number 2, which is Windsong, Wash and Roll. It's an amended preliminary master development plan and revised final master development plan. Sharon, are you presenting this?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Ma'am, go ahead.
All right. This is the second of the out parcels for Windsong. We just did the minor plat for lots 3 and 4 and had to move the lot line a little bit. We only have just approved the 7-Eleven that will go on lot 3. This is the wash and roll car wash that wants to go on lot 4. So if you look on the screen, to the west is where the 7-Eleven is going to go. This is wash and roll car wash. It's similar to actually they told me it was almost identical to the Mr. Car Wash that's out on Nashville Pike. And they do have another one up on Main Street that is where the old Vol State Bank was. We have, engineering had some concerns with having, the 7-Eleven has a cross access down in the southwestern corner. And the developers are going to have to work with trying to see if they can make that work and go all the way across to lot 5, which will develop next. Otherwise, they've done a pretty good job on their landscaping. The architecture, I think I have pictures of they are brick. There were some pictures of the kind of brick and stone that was being used. And there's signage. Most of the wall signage seems to meet the code requirements. And it looks like the monument sign will too. And I believe some of my applicants were going to be on this call. So, and if you have any questions, they're here to answer them, and we're working on that access.
Thank you, Sharon. Do we have a representative for the applicant online?
We have John Odom and Brian Peterson.
Hi, Brian Peterson here.
Thank you. Go ahead, Brian.
Too.
So I think in our first comments back, we had talked about some of the cross access with 7-Eleven. There was a image showing the connection to 7-Eleven. I think that would help for everybody's, just to have the visual. I'm not sure if that's a part of this package or not. It might have just been a comment that was sent back to us. I think the big concern that we have, generally speaking, with the cross access, the way they want to do it, is that towards Highway 109, that's the side of the property in which we're trying to connect the parcels. And for safety, we really always like to try and have our sites be one-way sites. And you can imagine if which would be lot 5, which is, I believe that's an Express Oil user, for them to come across westward to our property. I'm just not quite sure. Be very open to suggestion on how we might try and find a connection in there. The last project I know, we had a similar item that came up, and we weren't really able to connect because of this. I think we can work with the 7-Elevens cross connect, but I'm a little bit at a loss for how we would connect. Connect to the eastern most lot. So that's my only, open to suggestions, open to comments. I'm not real, that came up earlier this week, and we'd like to discuss that with you all today if possible.
Thank you, Mr. Peterson. Mr. Odom, did you have anything you wish to add?
I think that's the only comment that our team had was on that cross access portion of it. From an architecture standpoint, we are a full masonry building, so we should be complying with all of your regulations on that portion of it. So we should be good there.
right.
Mr. Peterson, question. Talking about the last project, the last item, we talk about cross connection. You're talking about the Washington roll that we approved where the old Ball State Bank is on Nashville Pike?
Yes, sir.
Okay. If I remember right, though, the issue there was a grade change between the properties that made it not feasible. Am I remembering that somewhat correctly?
I think you might be right on that, sir. I don't, it's been a little while since we had that. I think there was also a proposed road that either the city of Gallatin was looking to design and complete, and because the timing wasn't, there, I think we just stubbed out a road essentially, and for a potential future connection. But I do believe there's also a grade issue, and that would be on the south side of that property.
Gotcha. So, okay. Hey, Sharon, help me understand where the connection needs to go, or what engineering is looking for.
Okay, it's down there in the, if you look at there, look where
The cursor's out.
Where Dustin is putting the cursor. Yes. It's right along there. You might want to note they are on a private road up here too. And as far as having all of them connect across this way, that's where they were having an issue.
Okay. Is that cross connection something we require by ordinance or for this zoning, or is it just something we'd like to have if we can get it?
That was an engineering comment. Somebody from engineering on here?
Yeah, thank you. Brian Reisner, Engineering. So I'm just going back to what was approved with the PMDP, and they are showing some access arrows between parcels 3, 4, and 5. Now they have it closer towards this little spine road that runs through here on the PMDP, but because 7-Eleven was kind of the first one to come in, first come, first serve, they decided to move that to kind of a backage road concept. So we're just, if they don't want to do interconnectivity, that's fine. I don't know how this commission will look at that with what was approved on the PMDP, or how you would interpret that on the PMDP. So we know that there's another person pursuing out parcel 5, which is to the east of this site, and they had made a provision to continue that backage road along Highway 109.
Okay. By chance, do we have a copy of what we approved on the PMPD so we could take a look at how that connection was? Is that available tonight?
Dustin, can you pull that up or?
Yeah, let me see if I can find it.
All right. Then the only other question I had on the way y'all are looking for that was the 10-foot rear and side buffer yards. Is that consistent with the preliminary plan, or is that an exception that's being asked for?
Go to let's see. No, this is the other one.
Matt, can you repeat the question, please?
Oh yeah, the other question I had was just on the site plan that we were looking at for Washington Roll. I noticed just the buffer yards. It's showing a 10-foot rear buffer yard and 10-foot side buffer yards and setbacks. Is that consistent with the zoning that's there, or is that a variance or an exception that's being asked for on this project?
Sharon?
No, that's,
Go ahead, Sharon.
no, that is consistent with what's on the,
Okay.
what it was planned on the other. That's what went for that 7-Eleven lot, and I believe they're gonna carry on with the rest of it.
Okay.
So Sharon, what are the primary issues that you anticipate would be conditions of approval in staff's report?
Well, getting this cross-access thing settled was one thing. They had their photometric plan. I've already spoken with the photometric person this week, and he was working on that. Other than that, I believe everything looked pretty good.
Okay.
Architecture was good. Buffer yards looked good, so.
So I'll ask one question of the applicant, and it's really more to satisfy my curiosity than anything else. On these wash and roll layouts, I was just there at the one on Nashville Pike this weekend, did both cars, great setup, great flow and everything. What happens if someone pulls into that automated ticketing booth lane and then finds out that their car is not suited to go through the car wash? It didn't happen to me, but I'm just looking at the flow of this. How do you extract them out of there if you have a line of people?
This is Brian Peterson here. I can answer that. So we have a couple of stop bars and height bars because that's really the biggest, would be the biggest problem that we would typically run into, which is just the height of a vehicle. There are other vehicles that are large trucks, like a dually pickup truck. We cannot service due to the size of our conveyor track and everything. So in that instance here, for that particular vehicle, they would have to back their way up and get out. But height wise, they wouldn't get into they wouldn't be able to get in. So we'd have that restriction. And then for a vehicle the other situation I think is not exactly what you asked, but this does happen occasionally, which is if, let's say somebody comes through and they don't have they decide not to, they no longer want to wash. We can still pull them through the tunnel and turn the equipment off and have them through the tunnel in 20 to 30 seconds.
Okay. That was really my concern, was when you've answered it. You pull them through the tunnel and get them out of there, because if somebody has to back up in this layout, they have to back up all the way out to the private drive within Windsong. I don't really see another way to turn around. But
And
you've
I do
answered.
think, okay,
Yeah, John, that
Thank you,
brings up an interesting question. How is, not that I guess there's a big risk of fire, but let's say there's a fire on the property. How does, how does the fire department access this and feel about getting in there with the one-way traffic and being so restricted? I know we've approved several of these already, but I've never really thought about that before.
would fire be able to access from the backage road?
Yeah, I just know we talk a lot about fire truck access on projects, and this is basically a giant parking lot.
Mr. Peterson, do you want to respond to that?
Well, I think my first question is, or my first thought is, distance from, I don't have it exactly measured, but I believe other municipalities we've worked in have, 100-foot requirement from, the fire truck to a particular point of the building. If there's somebody here that could give us those numbers, we could go to work on that and maybe show that in in our next site plan. I do think, Greg Heckman is our engineer here, and we can I think he's on this call as well, and I know he could run some simulations as well, showing the truck as to how it could get in, just so you all have a visual, a visual for that. I think the area, this is a large site. This is an abnormally large site for us. So I think there is more room in, the entrance drive and, the road, what would appear to be the exit coming out of one of the parking areas, than appears on the site plan, the way we're looking at it. So I think a truck simulation could be very helpful, and we could certainly put that together and bring it, back in a few weeks.
Yeah, I think that would be good. And just, Sharon, I guess, can we just check with the fire department folks and make sure they're comfortable with these?
Yes, I can. I was looking to see if fire had made any comments on there. No, I don't see a comment on the correction sheet, so I'll have to check with them.
Okay.
We call our building codes inspector, Mr. Chuck Stewart. I think he'd like to speak. Chuck, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I'd have to check this in the morning, because I don't have a code book at home with me, but I believe that turning radius is going to be 110 feet, not 100 feet. But I'd have to look at it and make sure. If you got a 2018 IBC, you can look in the appendices, which we don't have them adopted appendices. We use it for our guidelines. We use the fire code book. It'll tell you, it'll show you that diagram, what that turning radius is.
I'll weigh in on we're not deliberating tonight, but the concern about the movement in the site, I'm usually all in favor of connectivity between the sites, and I know that it showed that on the PMDP. If this were along some other road, say along Nashville Pike, where there's not a backage road, I would have concerns about the layout of this site. But that private drive in Windsong development is a backage road, so they've provided a backage road through the development. That's why I'm not so concerned about the connectivity between the adjacent lots in this case.
Yeah. And I'll add to that too, John. I'm not real concerned about the connectivity, even though, because I think with the 7-Eleven, the wash and roll, and then potentially it sounds like an oil change place on 5, those are distinct uses that attract people specifically to them. So that's not a big concern for me. So
I'm afraid if we require some type of lot-to-lot connectivity, then the only result is that people that go to the 7-Eleven are going to get to vacuum their car for free. Anyhow,
I do have one other potential suggestion for lot connectivity, if it seems to be a big deal moving forward, which is that, the 7-Eleven. Yeah, this is Brian here.
Okay, go ahead, Brian.
I'm on a delay. Sorry about that.
No, I just wanted to identify who's speaking so we have it in the record.
Yes, sir. As I mentioned, I may be open to working with 7-Eleven or where their connectivity point is. I think that could potentially, help us even with the fire issue if we determine that there is one. But these one-way sites coming back the other way from the lot 5, seems to me to just not be feasible. So happy to have that as a part of open discussion in a few weeks.
All right. Thank you, Brian. Does anyone else have, Ms. Love, Councilwoman Love?
Thank you. And this isn't really any kind of criticism or pertaining specifically to this one, but Mr. Peterson, I have heard in the last month or so, many people not coming to me asking for this, but just mentioning that they would love to see a full service car wash in Gallatin, where we had one years ago. I don't know what happened to it, but just a suggestion.
Well, thank you for that. We'll certainly take that in. This will be our 3rd location here, and they're all very important to us, and the city of Gallatin has been great, and we want to make sure that we're meeting all the needs of all the customers in the market. So that's great feedback. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir.
I just want to mention the driveway that's shown for this plan is on the westerly side of the lot. The 7-Eleven driveway is on the easterly side of their lot. So those driveways will be fairly close together. Maybe Brian could address the distance between those driveways. And the PMDP, I think if I saw correctly, showed a driveway on this lot aligning with the driveway across the street, the private street on the north side of the street. So this will create jog driveways, even though they're not necessarily the same complementary uses maybe, but there will be offsets and creating a reverse jog driveway in a couple of places. So people coming, for example, out of the westerly driveway from the grocery store and the smaller shopping center would then conflict with the left turn lane to turn into the driveway into the shopping center, as shown on the PMDP.
Thank you, Bill. Does anyone else have any comments, questions, or concerns? Seeing none, then we'll move on to, we'll see this back in a couple of weeks. Thank you. We'll move on to
Thank you.
We'll move on to item number 3, which is Villas on the Green, Phase 2C. And Jillian, you're presenting this item?
Yes.
Go ahead, Jillian.
Next slide, please. The applicant requests approval of a final plat for Villas on the Greens, Phase 2C, for 12 attached single-family lots. The subdivision is located south of Nashville Pike, across from Kennesaw Boulevard. Next slide, please. All lots will be accessed by private streets, and the plat does need some corrections. We're still figuring out some things with the phasing that I had some comments for the applicant, but the layout for 2C is consistent with the FMDP. The unit count, everything like that is the same. So this will, once we get some corrections, this will just be the next phase of this development. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Jillian. Do we have a representative for the applicant online?
Yes, I'm Bobby Bell here. I'm here to take any questions. And like Jillian said, I've seen the comments and it just more or less seems like we need to get some language on the plat figured out and phasing and whatnot. But it's pretty, like Jillian said, pretty much just matching the approved FMDP. We're trying to get these 4 quads or 3 quads in the back platted.
All right. Thank you, Bobby. Jillian, are there any conditions of approval that you anticipate that we should be paying attention to or looking for?
I don't believe so. Once they make some corrections and we get Phase 2A needs some clarification because we had a couple overlapping plats. So we're just going to fix that phasing and make sure that's correct for you guys in 2 weeks.
Very good, thank you. Then any questions from members of the commission?
I don't have anything on this. This looks really straightforward. Sounds like all they got a little plat cleanup to do.
Looks very procedural to me. Well, seeing none, then we'll move on to, we'll see this back in a couple of weeks. Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll move on to item number 4, which is Northfield Church, a rezoning with preliminary master development plan. And Jillian, are you presenting this item?
Yes, sir, I am.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Next slide, please. The applicant requests a recommendation of approval for the rezoning and preliminary master development plan for Northfield Church expansion on 20 acres. Northfield Church is located on Nashville Pike towards Hendersonville, past Big Station Camp. Next slide, please. There are a couple different parcels included within the Northfield Church property. There is the lot on the right-hand side of this page, which is zoned MRO. And then the rest of the parcel is zoned R20, which includes most of the church property with their parking. Next slide, please. A conditional use permit was approved for the church in 1983, and there have been various site plans and amendments approved over the years. The applicant would like to rezone the entire property to MRO. Places of worship and their accessory uses are permitted uses in the MRO zone district. The expansion includes the remodel and expansion of the church space, the construction of a preschool and office building, the construction of a village's community area to provide housing for people in need, and other various accessory facilities. On the diagram, I believe the brown buildings are existing and the blue are the proposed. The main church area and school, next slide, please. The main church area and school would require approval of an alternative architecture as they do not meet the 70% brick stone requirement, although they are relatively consistent with the existing church. R20 didn't have a brick stone requirement. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. And here are the elevations for the expansion with the material list. Next slide, please. The village will be made up of 60 units and will also require approval of an alternative architecture for the 3-story attached units. The materials included metal and hardy board predominantly. I have asked for clarification from the applicant as to if a height exception will be needed. The height allowance for MRO is 35 feet, and here we would measure it at the midpoint, so it'll be close. We'll see what that number ends up being, if they need an exception or not. And if you could go back to the main site plan, please. Staff also recommends that sidewalk connectivity be improved throughout the site, with sidewalks connecting to any public sidewalks, the addition of public sidewalks, and then private sidewalks throughout. Staff has requested a little bit more information addressing buffer yards and stormwater easements and other various technical information, although many of the more concrete aspects will be provided at the FMDP stage. Again, this is a rezoning with a PMDP for this property. It will go on to City Council with your recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Jillian. Do we have a representative on behalf of the applicant or the applicant themselves?
Chairman, per year, this is Andy Leith, and we are representing this project for Northfield Church. The Northfield Church design team is also on this meeting tonight, and Mr. Bill Jacoby with the church would like to speak to you guys for just a moment, and then I'll address Jillian's presentation.
All right, thank you, Andy.
If you're on here, Mr. Jacoby, just raise your hand or let Josh know that you're here.
That work out okay? I just raised my hand.
We can hear you.
Great. Hey, first of all, thank you, Jillian, for the overview. Thank you, John. Thank you, Andy. The context I wanted to provide is that our church current 20 acres is made up of the 2 parcels that Jillian mentioned, and we've been spending quite a bit of time on what our master plan should look like for the property and what its purpose was. And a majority of what we've been focusing on is how we can better serve the community of Sumner County in addition to the outreach we do today, but actually on our property itself. You saw some reference to the Sumner Center, which is an existing building that we're going to dedicate to Sumner County. That will include a dental lab facility, basically a 6-day-a-week food bank for people in need with food, and then also services that will allow them to create stability in their life through having a budget that they can manage and save to be able to afford the costs in our county currently, and then other programming like job preparation, resume building, and interviewing skills. Part of that work is to focus on an area of our county that actually, I don't know if Alana Hibbler joined the call or not, but it's a group called ALICE, Asset Limited, Income Constrained but Employed. It's a United Way category of people that are living well above the poverty line, but still can't afford the basic costs of living in our area. And most of them need about a year or two of stability just to have enough savings to be able to afford that living. So the focus of the villages, which you see in the upper right of this visual, is not on a traditional homeless solution. It's for people that have worked their way out of homelessness, but are still not quite yet in a stable situation from a living standpoint, to give them a year or two as part of a program, a reasonably rigorous program, the opportunity to get stable and then to move into a place of their own, either a house or an apartment. So that's one of the two focuses of the villages. The second focus is that we do a lot with families with young adults with special needs. And one of the rising areas of need opportunity for those families is if the parents or caregivers were ever to pass away, who would take care of and how would their young adult live independently? And so one of the other focus areas of our villages is to provide units where the young adult with special need can live independently, but also have someone on that same floor. The floors are basically 4 units per floor, 3 floors. One of the 4 units would be occupied by someone to be responsible for caregiving and keeping track of the young adult with special needs. So the two intended target audiences of the villages are the people in the ALICE category that are just about the stability but need a few more years to have the money to get a place of their own, and then also young adults with special needs for the families that we work with in our ministries.
Thank you, Mr. Jacoby. Andy, you said you wanted to address some of staff's comments.
Yes, sir.
Hey, I got a question before we go to Andy.
Yeah. Okay, go ahead.
Will there be a sidewalk from the main campus to the village?
So right now, our thoughts from the villages to the main campus was to do more of a natural stone, depending on your definition of a sidewalk. We were hoping to have—
Or a trail.
A stone trail through that open area right there. It would provide access, but not be a formal, I'd say, concrete sidewalk. Just it's a very natural area, that open grass area. And we're going to keep it that way because that's going to be a great place for the villages community and our community to come together, in addition to the pavilion and some of the play areas there. So there is a plan, but it's not I'd say a formal concrete sidewalk.
Okay.
Andy, do you want to respond to staff's questions or comments? Go ahead, Andy.
Okay, so we are predominantly in agreement with all comments, and not that any of the comments were wrong or out of place. We probably are going to come back and ask for variances to the landscape buffer due to the fact that so much of that property that adjoins the Rogers Group will most likely stay wooded indefinitely. I don't think the quarry operation can come over that far. We do have areas that we can set aside for stormwater and all that. We will show that. We will be asking for the variances to the architecture. The architect, I think, is on this call tonight as well. So he may be able to address the comment regarding the height tonight. If not, we'll get that taken care of. If there is a variance required for the height, it's not going to be much. The big ticket item that we would like to discuss tonight will be the sidewalks along Nashville Pike. This particular area is a little bit different than the area right across the street from us, which is predominantly a commercial development with a lot of residential in behind it. On our side of the street, our property is the largest property there. And to the west of us, you've got Rogers Group and the bed and breakfast and the Comer Farm, which probably will never develop due to the ownership of that piece of land. And to the east of us, some smaller tracts as well. So we've talked about this with the church right now. We'd like to explore some alternatives to the sidewalk along Nashville Pike due to the fact that we just don't feel like it serves this side of the street the same way it serves the south side of the street or the south side of Nashville Pike. The variances to the landscaping and the architecture we feel will be fitting and not really so much out of place, but trying to work with what's the existing surroundings. So other than that, I feel like we're in agreement with all the comments. And I'm happy to entertain any questions you might have.
Okay, thank you, Andy. I see that we do have a representative from BGW Architecture Firm. Is it Mr. Adrian or is that Adrian Ben?
Yes, it's Adrian Ben with BGW Architects. So I do believe we don't have the elevation indicated for the village, on the village elevations for that height, but I do believe that we are under that maximum height at the midspan.
All right. Thank you, Adrian. I'll just ask a question of staff. Of course, we haven't seen the staff report yet. So when Andy references that they can be in compliance with comments, what other than the height variance, what the staff consider will be the conditions, the most important conditions of approval that we should focus on?
Yes, you'll want to focus on the alternative buffers. He's likely talking about like the northern side where there is existing vegetation. So I would make note of that. Alternatives to architecture, not meeting the 70% brick and stone, although there is an existing building, which would affect that as well. Height, if there is a height exception, we'll make sure that is noted for you. And then the sidewalk, I believe staff made a note of wanting the sidewalk along Nashville Pike. And it sounds like they might want to do some alternatives to that. So that would be another thing to take note of.
All right, thank you. Well, I'll lead off the discussion with saying that this item in particular, when I looked at when I read through this agenda tonight, caught my attention because I was not sure if this is a commercial enterprise, the villages, if that's a commercial enterprise or a charitable endeavor. But after hearing Mr. Jacoby speak, I'm really interested in this, and I'll read through staff's report once they get it finished without prejudice.
Thank you, John. I appreciate the time to present that. And just one other comment along that Nashville Pike area where the sidewalk was at least recommended or proposed. It's extremely steep from where Nashville Pike is straight down there. All the water runs straight down through there. So I'm not quite sure how we do that if it was a need, but certainly part of the discussion when we think about what the alternative might look like.
Yeah, I will give you feedback. We're supposed to kind of give you some feedback before you come back to us in 2 weeks. I agree with what Mr. Wilson was suggesting. You need sidewalk connectivity from the villages over to the main campus, and it doesn't need to be a mulch chip trail. I want to make sure that these two projects are interconnected, and that in the future this isn't the beginning of a commercial endeavor apartment complex grouping.
Okay. Good.
So pedestrian connectivity is going to be important. Someone else have a comment or a question?
Yeah, I do, and Andy might be able to answer this. If I recall, are there sidewalks on Pilot View? I think I remember seeing sidewalks over there.
Yes, there are sidewalks along Pilot View, and I believe that I don't think the church is going to have any objections to utilizing that Pilot View because they own that corner lot as well.
Okay.
So there are sidewalks along Pilot View, at least sort of like on 1.5 sides of Pilot View. It goes the whole length on the western side of Pilot View and about 3/4 the length on the eastern side of Pilot View.
Okay. Where Pilot View terminates back there, is that Rogers Group back behind that, or is that, I'm not familiar with that property.
You know, I don't exactly know if Rogers Group actually owns that land. But it is part of the quarry operation, I believe. Now, I could be wrong. I'm trying to pull it up on the map right now as we speak as to who owns that particular parcel.
I see it. There it is.
There's a little sliver behind us that they use for their septic lines. I don't know who owns that, but.
Well, I'll speak a little bit to the architecture. The architecture for the church campus buildings, I don't see any concerns with. It appears to be consistent with what's already there. So expanding upon that doesn't cause me any concerns. The architecture on the village, and this may be a question for staff, is there a requirement for those buildings to comply with any type of brick requirements, or is it more,
This would have the 70% brick requirement because of the MRO zoning. So you'd have to approve an alternative if you were okay with them not meeting that.
Got it.
Let me jump in real fast. The reason we're asking for MRO zoning is because the church has so many different activities they wanted to do there. It just made more sense to try to go ahead and get the zoning in compliance rather than try to operate out from under that R20. So it's really because of all the activities they want to offer to the community. We felt like it'd be cleaner and more neat. Just go ahead and rezone the property to MRO like the rest of the property around it.
Okay. But does the brick requirements, doesn't it still apply to the MRO zoning or not?
It does to MRO, but Jillian, correct me, I don't think the brick and stone for the R20, it doesn't apply.
Not for for single family R20. I think that's how the language is. If you had an R20 development and it was single family, you wouldn't have the brick and stone requirement. But let's see, multifamily like this isn't even allowed in R20. So.
And that's another reason we are requesting this rezoning.
Yeah. So I think that you'd still need an alternative. The Planning Commission would still need to approve an alternative if you didn't want to do the 70% here.
Okay.
So that's up to the commission.
Yeah.
Any other input from members of the commission? Yes, Councilwoman Love, you're on mute.
Forgot I was muted. So there's 5 of these buildings for housing that is called the village or the villages in the backs. Where is the dental clinic and the food bank? Where are those going to be?
If you go back to the master plan, do you see where the Sumner Center has a Northfield logo on it? The brown, it's in brown toward the back. It's very close. It's the closest building to the villages. Yeah. So that I think that also reinforces the point that Johnny Wilson made, and I think Matt or John, one of you all also made the same point about that. That's a good reason also to have everything connected through sidewalks, because that's the primary place where all the programming will be that almost everyone that's in the villages will be participating in.
Okay, the words are so small I can't really see what's what, but where is the preschool?
So the light blue square building that's closest to Nashville Pike.
Okay, I see.
Yeah, so the first floor of that would be a preschool capacity of about 144. And it would also obviously serve as our preschool area for the church programming as well. But during the week, it would be preschool. It's a partnership we have with another organization that combines Christian curriculum with STEAM, science, technology, engineering, arts, and math curriculum. The second floor, which would be on the same level as our worship space, would be our kids area for kids programming for the church and community. And then the third floor would be for the offices. We're rapidly running out of office space right now, in addition to space for kids and preschool.
So will the church itself be responsible for running these things, or will you rent this out to private private dentists or private owners of a preschool, or how? What does that work?
Yeah, we will be responsible for running it. We're blessed with several dentists in our church community currently, and then also doing work with Interfaith Dental, which is downtown. These dental clinics are becoming more and more popular because TennCare typically does not cover the adult, it covers the kids. And so the needs, it's a very big unmet need in our communities. And the dentists all partner together on these free dental clinic days, which can be as frequently as once a month, but usually are about once every 2 months. And they partner, and the clinical and the doctors obviously are dentists and hygienists, and then the rest of the support volunteers are from the community. But we would plan to operate that, maintain it, and then also be responsible for recruiting and planning the dentists and the hygienists that participate on the actual dental days, as well as when the clinic is open.
Thank you.
Hey, I've got a few more questions. Kind of going back to the village. Am I correct in seeing it looks like it's going to be a gated access in there?
Yes, that was the current plan coming in off of Pilot View, to have the driveway be a private driveway that was gated, card keyed.
Okay, and then a question for staff. While I understand the initial the intention is for this to be a community outreach and assistance, if we approve these units, is there anything that prevents them from being turned into just pure apartment rentals in the future? I'm not saying that's the church's intent. I don't want to infer that at all, but
No, there's not.
okay. And with kind of with that, I go back to the architecture. Just for you take it out of the context of it being for a church, and I really do like the concept, and I think it's something that's needed. I think we do have to look at it from the lens of, would we allow that architecture in any other application? I don't think we would.
If this is Adrian with BGW, if I could share one of the ideas as far as, the reason why we would be looking at getting a variance for the architecture of the church building is really to match what is already there for that large view that you get from the street side, kind of matching that architecture that is there.
But with all respect, I don't think the church building itself is an issue at all for me, or nobody else has spoken up, but it's already consistent with the existing church building. I'm really speaking towards the village.
Okay. Well, I think that, obviously we're trying to keep, costs in mind, as we know the costs are going up for everything now, but I don't think we're opposed to entertaining the idea of bringing some more stone and, stone elements and brick elements to these elevations.
I'll raise one question I would like for staff to look into before our meeting in a couple of weeks. I think, if I understand correctly, each building has, is it 6 units per building? Is that, I guess that's a question for Mr. Jacoby.
Yeah, it's 4 units per floor, 3 floors, so it would be 12. 12 units per building, 4 per floor.
And you have 6 buildings?
5. So it's a
5.
density of 60.
You have
Yes.
60 units, but I did a rough count. You only have 60 parking spaces. Do we only require in our code 1 parking space per apartment complex unit?
I did
No, that
ask
was-
if these are efficiency apartments, then that's the minimum, but I did ask about bedrooms, and that would affect that parking count.
Yes, that was one of the comments that we saw.
Hey, John.
And they're not efficiencies, so we have to reflect the parking in the revision.
Dr. Orgain, did you have a question?
I have a question for Matt. Matt, are your concerns the architectural design or all those color components?
It's really not the color components, as much as just the overall architecture design. again, I'm looking at it as any other project. It just aesthetically doesn't fit with anything else we've done in the city of Gallatin that I know of.
So it's a major entry point into our community, and we want it to be compatible.
And to be honest, I'm trying to look at this from the standpoint of, if 5 years, 10 years, 20 years in the future, it's no longer being used for its intended purpose today, which I hope it is. I think we have to look at this as, how would we approve it if it was, just rental apartments? And I just don't think the architecture fits.
Agree.
I tend to agree too.
Yeah, and the parking, I think, John beat me to on the parking, but I think the parking requirements, the access, the architecture, the brickstone requirements, while I think it's a worthy cause and admirable, I think it needs to be compliant with everything we'd require of any other multifamily complex.
Matt, this is Josh. Is it the materials or the proportion of openings, windows, and doors? Is it the
materials? Materials, proportions of windows, opening, and doors. I don't really, see. I think and I can't tell what's on the porches. It looks like, is it like a stone column with the post on each floor? And it's kind of hard to tell what that is from the size of the drawing. So I can go back and find it.
Sorry, I was muted. Yeah, this is Adrian Ben with BGW. It is basically a stone. It is a stone pedestal, okay, with the hardy board, the cementitious siding against the building at those patio areas.
Okay.
So, Matt, I have a question. It's Bill Jacoby from Northfield. The intent of all of this is that we want this area to be a beautiful area, something that is aesthetically pleasing to the eye, as well as comfortable and a wonderful community area for the families that we were working with, whether they be a family with special needs or a family that's just about into stability in their life. Do you have anything I've found on these architectural reviews and discussions that I've had in the past? Everyone has a different idea of what things should look like, but do you have anything that kind of visualizes what you think is the look and feel that is appropriate for Gallatin that we can gauge from? Because otherwise, I don't know. I don't want to throw stuff up on the wind and not get it right.
Are these finishes similar to some of the new contemporary finishes that you see in these apartment structures in Nashville?
That's my impression of them from looking at the materials and seeing what's in Nashville. It's a little bit more modern in its design. And that's reasonably consistent. I think someone said earlier, it's reasonably consistent with our church building as well. Not too far into the edge, but it's definitely more contemporary and modern in its look, and not looking exactly like an apartment complex, which is not what we want it to look like. We want it to look like a villages area.
I guess if you're feedback on the architecture, I think it might help the visual and the height of the buildings if, say, the first floor was predominantly a brickstone combination with the alternate materials above it, just to that would help break the height of the building up. Because right now it's like you've got like where the Hardy is on the back of the building, we've got 4 stories of windows, is just the scale, and that's just really tall. But if we had brick around the first floor and then the alternative materials above it, I think that would help it a lot.
Good. That's helpful. That's the kind of stuff I was looking for. So thank you for that.
Yeah, those types of things. I think my biggest concern, as I'm sitting here looking at it, is just it's the not the width, but just the height of the corrugated metal panels and the Hardy board. I think those are neat building elements, and we're seeing more and more of it. But I think if you guys could come back with something that had the first floor done in more of a predominant brick stone with the alternative, I might even say you have to change the metal and the Hardy. It's just a lot of it. So that would,
okay.
I think that would help it.
I've seen this look in Atlanta. I've seen it in Charlotte. I've seen it in Denver, certainly all over Nashville. And again, it's new, it's contemporary, but it doesn't really fit the character of what's already there. And I'm not a visionary.
I would agree with you, Rick. I think, although I will say I think the architecture of Gallatin is in maybe probably a transitional period is the way to say it, where, that trend is coming here. And I'm not saying I'm opposed to it, but as those looks come, just trying to make sure we mold them in rather than just, changing that rapidly. I guess that's what, if you go back to answer your question, if it helps what do I think Gallatin looks like? And I think Gallatin is going to have more of a modern contemporary architecture in the future, because that's just the trend nationally, to be honest. But if we can kind of get a halfway point or some way that helps, transition it in would be good. So I don't know what else to add to that.
No, good. That was very helpful. Thank you.
Okay.
All right. Any other questions or comments?
Mr. Chairman, if I could.
Yes, please go ahead.
I just wanted to talk about the sidewalk for a second. This is Brian with engineering. One of our comments about the sidewalk was just because at some point there will be a signalized intersection at Gordon's Crossing and Nashville Pike. And as part of that design, we currently had TDOT go out 2 years ago and do a warrant study at that intersection. And at the time, they didn't find enough, it didn't meet any warrants for a signalized intersection there, which is kind of surprising because there's been so much stuff built. But they don't do it on what will be there. They just did it at what was there currently. But what we would like to see in engineering is some connectivity for these people that will be in the village if they need to get over to the Kroger marketplace, that they have a safe way of crossing Nashville Pike with a pedestrian crossing or a sidewalk along Nashville Pike where they can safely get over to that area. So that's kind of where we're coming from on that.
Brian, question for So a signal is coming to that intersection. It's just a matter of when it warrants it. Is that what I understand?
Yeah, I believe it's going to be warranted now that we have the car wash, all that other stuff, the Taco Bell, the Burger King's coming, the daycare's over there, the Gallatin Honda dealership's up and running. So I'd be very surprised if it's not warranted now.
I think it would at least make sense to connect sidewalk from the existing sidewalk at Pilot View up to where the signalized intersection would be, to provide connectivity across the street in the future. But I think that would be a good idea. Whether it needs to go on past that, I don't know.
Dr. Orgain, did you want to add something?
Is there any connectivity to the church, a path or something?
Where?
What? I think I'm talking about doing the sidewalk from the village to the parking lot at the church complex, but
Dr. Orgain, I think earlier they recognized that there does need to be a pedestrian connectivity from the village over to the church area, because that's where all of the services, like the dental services and other things that they're providing as an outreach will be. So
yes,
I believe they are agreeing to do that. I completely agree that there needs to be connectivity to the main road, and especially with the signalized intersection, particularly if the mission of these apartments, the villages, is to provide people who are in need. They're going to be a little bit more pedestrian oriented than some other residents. So there needs to be connectivity. Let the record show, if there are no other questions, we'll move to the next item. But let the record show that Councilwoman Love needed to, she had to leave the meeting around 6 o'clock, but Mrs. Hibbler has joined the meeting at the beginning of this item, I believe. So with that, we will move to item number 5, which is Halloway Investments, a rezoning with preliminary master development plan. Dustin, are you presenting this item?
Yes, sir. All right. So this is located on West Eastland Street. You see just west of downtown there. It's currently zoned CG. You can see it's surrounded by CG zoning, but there is some R6 just very close by. You see it in brown there. They're requesting a rezoning to R6, and the comp plan does support that rezoning to R6. This is their site plan. What they're proposing to do, if you look down here on your screen, there are 2 existing single-family homes that are somewhat dilapidated. They're going to come in and tear those down and combine the lot and put a duplex in its place with the R6 zoning. So some of the only issues, they are going to ask for a buffer yard exception. The type 20s that they would be required to put in would basically eat up their whole site, so they need to reduce down to type 10s. Our comments, basically they need to take this drive out of the front buffer yard and put some trees up there. And so this will go on to council with the Planning Commission's recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Dustin. Do we have a representative on behalf of the applicant?
Chairman, this is Andy Greenlid. We're pretty well in agreement with all comments that have been made. Still working with the owner of the property right now about their options. I think what makes this difficult is you have 2 lots over there right now that have non-conforming uses on it that have been there for a long time because those residential uses are not allowed in CG. But then again, at the other time, if you just try to straight rezone each lot to R6, there's a non-conforming R6 lot. So this is an older area of town that has lots of complications when it comes to being compliant with the current zoning ordinance. And we're trying to do our best by making this lot compliant with its existing uses and intended uses in the future.
All right. Thank you, Andy. Staff, what, other than the, I guess you'd say the encroachment into the front yard there, and you want some trees in the front, what are the other major conditions of approval you anticipate being placed on this application?
Those are all, as long as the applicant addresses those issues and puts a note saying that they have an alternative buffer yard plan. We did want to see some example architecture. I mean, we'll see this again with the FMDP, but just wanted to see what they were planning on putting architecturally.
Hey, Dustin, what, I'm not that familiar with this particular street. I mean, I know the area, but what is adjacent to this property now? Is it still primarily residential, or, it looks like across the street, it's got maybe some commercial property going? What's around there?
It is still mostly commercial, especially on that side of the street. Mm-hmm. Across the street, there is a larger commercial, maybe industrial type use. But you can see just that's a business, but it's basically a long row of non-conforming residential uses. And this zoning goes back to the 50s. This commercial zoning on these residential areas. So with the comp plan, it was determined that we could start rezoning these back to a residential use because that's what character area they're in. But yeah, it's mostly residential. There's commercial up here and down here, but mostly residential back in this area.
All right, that makes sense. Thanks.
So Andy, I'll just ask the question, in order to satisfy staff's concerns about the front yard and getting some trees up in the front yard, why are you pulling that so close to the road? You've got like lots of space. It's a really deep lot.
You are correct. So we can pull it back. I mean, there's
okay.
no issue in that. We pull it back.
Yeah,
I think it was just the haste of getting something drafted quickly and getting it turned in.
Yeah, and I think that would help it. Just my other feedback would be with the commercial across the street, if you pull that back on the lot, maybe get some trees in the front, I think I can be okay with it.
Gotcha. I don't think that'd be an issue.
Deep is that lot, Andy?
Do what?
How deep is that lot?
Oh, it's pretty deep. It's like 270 foot deep.
Oh, okay. It's one of those lots. Yeah, those date back to the days when somebody wanted to have a vegetable garden and a milk cow and a barn behind, I think.
We could work all that in. Yeah.
Well, no, that's
it's
where
good.
narrow, deep lots come from. Okay, very good. Are there any other questions or comments or anything? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to the next item, which will be item number 6, Vinewood Townhomes. I think is it Vinewood or Vinewood? A preliminary master development plan. Jillian, you're presenting this item?
Yes, I am.
Go ahead.
Next slide, please. The applicant requests a recommendation of approval for preliminary master development plan for the Vinewood Townhomes, a new development for 51 single-family attached townhomes on 7.24 acres. This subdivision will be located behind Lowe's off of Browns Lane. Next slide, please. The 2 lots included in this request are within the Lowe's final plat. Lot 2, where the townhomes are located, was zoned MRO a number of years ago, but has no master plan. Lot 3 is within the Lowe's master plan, and a portion of it will be used for stormwater management for the townhome development. This request will require City Council approval of the PMDP, even though there is not a rezoning involved. You might recall that the applicant has previously proposed a hotel on this lot, but that did not get approved. This was the Fairfield Inn from a couple years ago. Next slide, please. The townhomes are shown to be on individual lots. Exceptions to lot sizes and setbacks will be required due to the type of development and the existing MRO zoning. This is a similar layout and design as the recently approved Noble Park townhomes and the townhomes in Winsong. So those lots are particularly small, but the building footprint takes up most of it. The proposed elevations show an overall total of 70% brick and stone, but the front and rear facades are 62% and 50% brick and stone respectively, which would require approval of an alternative if it's not revised. Other materials used include lap siding, board and batten siding, and shake siding, although it didn't note if it was vinyl or hardy with this. I have asked which one that is. Again, the applicant is here to answer any additional questions.
Thank you. If we have a representative for the applicant, please state your name.
Chairman, this is Andy Leith, Greenland Design. I don't foresee any issues with amending the architecture to be compliant and not request any variances.
Okay. So I'll just ask staff, since that won't be an issue, the architecture, are there any other major considerations or conditions of approval that you anticipate placing on this application?
Yes. So definitely the lots will have exceptions for the size, the width, and the setbacks. Again, we've seen townhome developments like this, but there will be that exception. Buffer yards in the area where the road kind of gets really narrow. They are showing sidewalks on both sides, but seeing how they're going to handle the road plus the sidewalk and the landscaping right next to that detention pond. We had some comments about making sure that screening is appropriate. They will need some easements for the off-site detention. So we will make sure that they know everything they need for stormwater. And then I did ask about existing vegetation along the east and the south, especially the south, because we have the existing cottages there. So making sure that we're retaining the existing trees while supplementing any additional buffer that we need. So those would be the substantial things that I would take note of.
All right. Thank you, Jillian. Questions or comments, anything from members of the commission?
I guess my comments would be, looking this over, the lot size, goodness, I mean, it's just that site, if anybody's ever actually been out there, it's a tough one to put anything on. So there's a lot of unused space with it. So I don't see any issues with that part of it. And it's a much better option than a hotel. So
This one, remind me, will this item include a public comment at our regular agenda meeting?
It will, yes.
Okay. So if there are no other questions.
Mr. Chair, I just want to point out that because of the topography of this property, it's possible, and we haven't seen the details of the construction of the units other than those renderings, but they could even include a basement type of arrangement because they slope the backs of each one. The back half of each one of the units would be built on a slope. So either you're building a big head wall in the back with possible basement storage area, or adding another floor in there. So that would be the case on the exterior units. That wouldn't necessarily have to apply to the interior units.
Andy, can you speak to that?
Yes, so the geotech report is recommending the removal of 10 feet of that material on the top. So by the time we remove 10 foot of material, your flat area that's left is about the building footprint. So, there may be a taller foundation wall in the rear, but we don't think it'll be so tall that it would lend itself to basements. So because we've got to cut that down about 10 foot.
Okay, so the topo that's shown on the site plan is the existing conditions then, right?
Yes, that'll be cut down 10 foot. Yeah, that's existing.
Okay. I think that helps this project, not only for the buildings not having basements under them, but it's going to get it down a little bit, which will help it with the adjacent neighborhood. So that's good to hear. And I think we had a similar thing that was talked about when it was being proposed as the hotel that was going to be cut down as well. So
that was the same geotech report.
Will, can you do a site plan that shows the proposed topo elevation just to see how the grade would work when you knock the 10 feet off? Is that something we'll have in 2 weeks?
I can, because we've already looked at it, so just be a matter of adding that second sheet in there.
I think that would add some clarity to the site plan, but other than that, I think that's all I've got on it.
If there are no other questions, then we will see this back in a couple of weeks. We'll go ahead and move on to item number 7, which is Andy's Frozen Custard, amended preliminary master development plan and revised final master development plans. Dustin, you're presenting this item?
Yes, sir. So this is located on the south side of Nashville Pike, just west of Browns Lane, on a private street right across from the new Subaru. So they're proposing a 1,986 square foot building with a drive-through and parking lot. This is their drainage plan. Their bioretention pond will be there to the east, which will absorb some drainage from this side, and one's from the north or from the south. And let me mention, this is an ice cream place. Here's their buffer yard plan. They're in PGC zoning, so that requires quite a bit of extensive landscaping that I'm not seeing on this plan. I don't know if that's in the works or if they're going to have to ask for an alternative, but they've got a pretty intense shrub requirement to put throughout the site, and then they need to add in some parking lot landscaping in there that's just part of normal zoning. The north part of the buffer yard, they're showing as shrubs, and that is because of a GDE requirement that there not be trees within an easement up there. So I guess that we'll have to live with that. But for the rest of the site, there's probably going to have to be some more landscaping. These are the elevations they're showing. It's a quite unique style of architecture. There's been some discussion back and forth on the signage requirements. This user typically employs a great deal of signage. We've provided some comps here for buildings in town. The way our sign code works is that it's based off how much length of frontage you have. So if you have a small building like this one, that limits the amount of signage that you're allowed. For example, Domino's had a 3,100 square foot building, and their total building signage came out to about 44 square feet that they asked for and were given. With our current code, Andy's would be permitted 81 square foot, but they're currently showing 148. We've kind of interpreted some of the elements of the site to not be signage that could possibly be construed as signage. So we feel like we're being pretty generous as far as allowing them as much signage on their building as they can, or as they want to put. But that's probably where, without an alternative signage plan approval by the commission, they'd have to reduce that signage quite a bit. So, but again, this would be a major amendment to this PMDP and would go to council with commission's recommendation. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Dustin. Do we have a representative for the applicant online?
Chairman, this is Andy Greenlid. The developer is also supposed to be on this call as well, and he would like to speak. I'll speak to the landscaping. We'll fix all that and get that taken care of. So I don't think we'll have any issues with. I take that back. We are going to have some issues because we have a sewer easement along the front of the property and a sewer easement running along the left-hand side of us. You've also got a water line running along the rear. So we've got utilities on three sides that will be challenging to plant trees in, but I feel like that it would only be fair to try to work that landscaping into the site. And we have some areas that we can do that to put a more complete landscape plan back in front of you all for the planning commission meeting. But the developer would like to speak to the signage, and he's supposed to be on this call. So Mr. Augie, if you're on this call, just raise your hand.
Augie, your line's been unmuted.
Okay, thanks, Josh. Yeah, my name's Augie Nichols. I'm a developer for Andy's Frozen Custard, and I'm helping the group that is expanding in the middle part of Tennessee. And so appreciate you guys having us. We know that we went through the last work session and had to make some changes to our building and kind of dial it down a little bit and try to get it to fit within the look and feel of the city. So appreciate everybody that helped us work with that. As far as the signage goes, we do have a pretty signage heavy building for as small as we are. I don't know if you can go back, Josh. So this rendering here is not one that's been pared back after we've had conversations with Josh. What we would like to do and what we would like for the commission to consider is if we were to, can you go back to the rendering for just a second? If we could remove all of the wall signage except for that signage that is up on what we call the blade up front. If we were to do that, we would be removing an abundance of the wall signage, but I still think that we would be over what the code would allow. We would like to work with some creative ways to try to get that, because we see it as kind of a minimum for the brand to have at least a sign up on that blade, and we think it would look a little bit odd to have signage on only one side of that blade. But again, we're open to some creative ideas to see if we can make that happen. And we've pared this signage package way back in order to try to play ball and meet with all the requirements of the city. So if there's any suggestion or any way that I might be able to achieve that, I would be very grateful for that input.
John, I have a comment.
Yes, Doc, go ahead, Dr. Orgain.
I know very little about LEDs, but I know the visibility of LEDs and the sharpness of the image is so much more than a typical sign. You might be able to decrease your footage and get all the presence that you want. And I don't know what the cost issues would be. That might be prohibitive. I don't know, but I think you could probably achieve everything you wanted by using some of the new technology.
I appreciate that input. We'll take that into consideration. I'll note that a lot of our signs already use LED features, and our constraint is not so much the brightness or the visibility. In fact, we've tried to dial that back per the recommendations of the committee the last work session we were in, but it's the ability to read it from, in this situation, you're going to be downhill, you're going to be down on the roadbed in a car trying to read and say, hey, what is that? That I see a cone, so I kind of know what the product is, but that's Andy's. That is the problem we're really trying to solve, is getting just enough to identify ourselves and what we do up on that blade.
Hey, question for staff. When we're measuring signage, like for instance, you had the Andy's logo and the ice cream cone up on the blade. It's got the, the veneer behind it. I don't know what the material is, but when you're looking at something like that from calculating the square footage, you're doing the overall width and height, as if you're drawing a box around it, or just the net square footage of the actual sign material itself against the facade.
Mr. Harris, that's a great question. Dustin, can you go to the next slide, please? So the way that we measured it, just for discussion purposes, is essentially drawing a square around this. But we did encourage Augie and his team, if they did a dynamic fill to get us the square footage of the exact measurements of this sign, to bring that number down, because we are playing a game of, when we're talking 81 square feet, every inch counts. And you see what Domino's did is what they were able to get significantly less by using channel letters, whereas Andy's Frozen Custard is all one unanimous sign.
It is, well, and going back and looking at the blade, where the ice cream cone is separated from the Andy's logo. I bet if you calculate the actual footage of what the signage is against the facade, it's a significantly less square foot than just drawing a box around it. So I think that would be a worthwhile endeavor.
We would be very appreciative of that. Let me ask a clarification question. Could we assume that we're just drawing around the letters and maybe the cone and leave the other portions of our logo out? Is that what you're saying? Because that may be able to get us there.
I think I'm going back, guys. I apologize. I've got screens up on different things. I'm looking at the elevation view on the actual plans, not just what's on the display screen. But can you go? There you go. But if you look up on the blade, the way you've got this drawing, you got the Andy's logo and your ice cream piece is two separate elements, so to speak. So if you're drawing a box around all of that, it's a lot of footage. But I would say, I guess the way I'm looking at it is I want to know what the square footage is of the actual logo, that's covering up the facade of the building. So that's what I would consider part of the signage, not drawing a box around the entire sign. So I don't, maybe they get you closer to the requirement, and but other comment I've got for you guys is we liked this last work session with the LED or the neon, band around it. This is vastly improved, and I actually kind of like it. It's got kind of a throwback retro look that is something I think would be attractive on Nashville Pike, and actually kind of fits in with the Subaru dealership next door to it. That's a little more of a modern look. So it's, I'm excited to see it come.
And this is adjacent to the former drive-in movie theater, so it kind of harkens back to that era of where this type of architectural style was a little bit more common.
Yeah. So, but I guess did that answer your question with some feedback on the signage?
Yes, sir, it did. I appreciate that, and I appreciate not only that, but as a person in your position supporting the free form measurement around a sign. We encounter this, as you might imagine, in other places that we go, the box theory. And I will say, just for conversation's sake, this rendering that's on here has not been adjusted per the conversations that I've had with Josh. We have combined the cone and the logo. If it were more appealing to the commissioners to see those broken out, if there was a way we could consider the cone as not a piece of signage, but as some sort of element, we would be happy to do that. But we thought combining the cone with the logo was the best use of space. I prefer the look of the separated cone, but I don't know if we're going to have enough square footage to do that if it's not looked at separately.
I don't know how it's going to come out of the footage, but aesthetically, I like the cone separated from the logo better, just from a aesthetics of looking at the building. So, but I don't know how that works out on the sign calculations.
I want to mention that the cone is part of the sign. It's like a logo, similar to a Target logo. So it needs to be counted as the sign. And if we can go back to the previous slide.
I guess, I mean, if the footage is being calculated in free form, if the cone's the same size, whether it's attached to the Andy's sign or not, I mean,
at a minimum, I think the image down in the bottom left-hand corner that we could consider total square footage of the area, including the dark line, the black line that surrounds the sign and the cone as a sign area. We do have 3 different types of sign areas and ways to calculate those. That includes for raceway signs, channel letter signs, and cabinet signs. So the most restrictive, meaning that would allow the larger sign, is the cabinet sign. So we would want to see what calculations you get by identifying a cabinet sign that includes only that area enveloped within the dark outline of the sign. See how many square feet that is.
Yes, sir. We will do that. Just anecdotally here, I ran a quick calculation. If we're able to get just to this sign and we remove the other wall signages altogether, using the rectangular method that we're using or that we had used previously, we were at 104 square feet and we're allowed 81. So hopefully this free-form measurement, if we can get 23 feet out of there, I don't know if we can, but if we can, we might be very close. So I appreciate that.
I think you're on the right direction, and I'm just one person, but if it's 2 square feet over, I don't think you're going to get a whole lot of pushback from me. But I think the idea is to get as close to the intent as possible.
Thank you for that.
Any other questions or concerns? All right, well then I'll just ask a couple. I noticed that the community sidewalk on the front, on the Nashville Pike side, appears to be on the property rather than in the right of way. Is that correct? Is that the community sidewalk? And if so, will we have an agreement in place?
That is one of the Chairman. That is one of the issues I forgot to mention. We need a sidewalk connection to the building. Now, along this frontage, that they're going to have to do a retaining wall that they've illustrated there. So our comment was to pull do a sidewalk down this private street and then put it over into the parking lot into the building there. But I don't know if that will be a condition you all want to impose.
So we
pedestrian connectivity, yes.
Yes, we intend to have that in the revision, sidewalk all the way around the property, just like Subaru did. And we'll have the connectivity to the Andy site up near the entrance is where it works itself in best.
I think what I was trying to ask earlier is on past sites where the community sidewalk is on the property rather than over in the right of way, we required a signed access agreement to provide access to that sidewalk, don't we? I'm asking staff.
Mr. Chairman, this is Brian with engineering. Yes, that would be a requirement. We've asked for a plat for a condition of a building approval on this just because there's a drainage easement that they're building across the sidewalk. And then we're looking at the conveyance of stormwater that comes from the south and runs through the site, so that they would need a drainage easement for that. So as a condition to get a building permit, they're going to have to record a plat and make those amendments or those changes.
Okay. And then the last question I know that I had is just when I look at the dumpster pad, it appears that the dumpster pad kind of encroaches into the path of travel for vehicles going around there. Is that, I'll ask engineering that question. Are you satisfied with the configuration of the dumpster pad? If so, then that's fine.
They're going to need to convey water again from the south to the north there. Andy, do you feel like you can push that dumpster pad to the, I guess that's the east?
So what you're seeing there is basically the concrete apron for the truck, the turning movement. The dumpster itself will not be in the travel lane. It'll be set back. But that's basically the concrete pad for the dump truck, the front wheels to sit on. But we can push it back a little bit.
Well, let me stress, I'm no engineer, so I'm not saying it has to go back. I was really asking Brian to weigh in. If Brian feels like it's fine, then there's no issue. I was just asking.
We're going to be able to route that water around the site, so I'm not worried about that.
Okay.
I'm fine with it, Mr. Chairman. I just, for aesthetics, I think you would want to push that back a little bit, and then just pay attention to the way that contractor comes to pick up the trash once a month, or not once a month, once a week. You know, how they're going to come in there and get that.
Yeah.
Very good. Any other questions, comments, or anything? All right, seeing none, we'll see this back in a couple of weeks, and we'll move on to item number 8, which is our last item on the list. It's Hangar Unlimited, a rezoning with preliminary master development plan. Dustin, you're presenting this item?
Yes, sir. So this is a PMDP with rezoning. It's located at 860 and 870 Blue Jay Way, just east of Lowe's. So this phase 1 here, you can see it's going to be developed in 2 phases. Phase 1 is a 11,850 square foot building that will be used as a high-end vehicular sales establishment, also with auto detailing and a showroom type space. And there's some kind of extra drives in and out of the building to facilitate the movement of automobiles in and out. Phase 2 will be just to the southeast here, and it will feature retail and restaurants. We just had, our comments were just basically some minor tweaks to the site. This is actually a collector, I believe, and so we're going to ask for them to remove one of these driveways, also to align this sidewalk with the existing sidewalk to the northwest. This is our drainage plan. It will drain into an existing inlet. One comment was that this area be increased. Of course, we'll see greater detail with that at the FMDP stage. Their architecture, we don't foresee any exceptions because they're going to match what's just to the north of them. That's nearby. So it's going to be all brick and stone. As I was saying, this will go to council with Planning Commission's recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Dustin. Do we have a representative for the applicant online?
Yes, this is Jim Harrison with CSTG. Y'all hear me okay?
Yes, go ahead, Jim.
All right, great. Dustin did a great job of explaining what we're trying to do. There's really trying to build this upscale automobile dealership, which is build it in a way so that they can expand out into a retail space similar to what's just on the north side of this lot, which is the retail center that has I believe it's Mario's Pizza in it, that everybody kind of sees as you drive by it. But we are working, and I talked today with Nick and Brian Riff Snyder a little bit about, we still would like to try to find a way to get 2 accesses in, but we're going to do it. We want to do it in a way that obviously complies with what would need to be there for the collector street, which is what Blue Jay Way is. So we're still working on some things there to tweak some of that in connection with circulation around the building. But other than that, obviously I've looked through all the staff comments and agree with those, and just here to answer any questions as needed. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Any questions from members of the commission? Actually, I'll ask a question real quick. If engineering is still online, does engineering have any comments or about the issues of the ingress, egress, and circulation?
Mr. Chairman, Brian with engineering. I think we can work this out with Jim. Like it's been stated before, North Blue Jay Way surprisingly is a collector, and so as a result, the driveway spacing there has to be 185 feet minimum, 235 feet desired. Of course, this was back in the Ron Coleman era before Nick Tuttle was engineer, and we're not quite sure what Ron's vision was for the spacing that was permitted, but a lot of these lots were kind of paired up together with joint access easements every other lot. And of course, a lot of these lots have been replatted several times. So I think we can work with the applicant to come up with a resolution, try to get the circulation internally on the site correct, as well as just making sure that we're not stacking up cars on North Blue Jay Way.
Yeah, I think long term, one of the concerns with Blue Jay Way is that eventually it'll connect in probably all the way back to the residential neighborhood that's back behind there in the future. So the potential for traffic down Blue Jay is larger than what is here today.
That is correct, yes. There is one property owner that stands in our way to doing that.
Any other questions from members of the commission?
Nope, my only question was about the driveway, the multiple driveway spacing.
So, question for Dustin is, other than the, I really didn't hear any other major concerns you have or significant conditions of approval that you'll place on this project other than the driveway entrance and connections.
Yeah, that's correct. It is a rezone of PGC, which, like that previous site, will require some pretty extensive landscaping. So one of my comments was to, if not to show it on the PMDP, to at least put some notes showing that they will comply with those standards.
So it's going to council because it's a rezoning, not because it's a change to a PMDP. Is that correct?
Well, yeah, basically, yep.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Very good. Are there any other questions or concerns?
Chair?
Yes, go
Chair
ahead.
Pereira, I don't know if you can hear me. This is Rosemary Bates with the Economic Development Agency.
Yes, go ahead, Rosemary.
Okay. I would like to, on behalf of our agency, just address the concern about this being, from what I'm hearing, and please correct me if I'm misunderstanding this, that you are rezoning it to allow for a used car lot on Blue Jay Way. Is that basically what the use will be?
No, Rosemary, this is Jim. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
It is definitely not anything like a used car lot. It is a very, very limited, very specific upscale showroom. These cars will all be inside. These cars are like Bentleys and Lamborghinis and things along that line. It's very, very, very far from anything like a used car lot.
I didn't get the impression this was a used car lot at all, so I didn't have any concerns with that.
Okay. And the rezoning is from, what is it currently? I'm sorry.
From
And you're
MRO to PGC.
I'm sorry, say that again.
Rezoning from MRO to PGC. Is that correct,
Okay.
Jim?
All right.
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Actually
I'm
has
only
more-
looking at this on my little
thank you.
tiny
That Rosemary,
phone,
that's
so I can't look at other stuff. It's like itty bitty.
Wait a minute, stop. We've got 3 people speaking at once. Rosemary,
No,
finish.
I apologize if I just made your meeting longer. I'm only looking at this on my cell phone, which is tiny itty bitty, and I can't call up the agenda at the same time to look at those documents. So I appreciate you allowing me to ask the questions, and you answered what I needed to hear for our group. Thank you very much.
So, Mr. Chairman and Jim and Rosemary, we can work together to put conditions of approval on the plan that would travel with the master development plan, so that if the car detail
Josh got cut off, but
are we there?
oh, there he is.
Okay. Sorry, my computer keeps trying to freeze up on me. We can work on some conditions of approval specifically to address the concerns of not having this site look like a used car lot in the event that Jim's client goes away.
Thank you very much. That is one of my concerns. Thank you.
We'll work with staff on that, get that done.
Vehicular craft and related services are a permitted use in the PGC district. So we're gonna have to be very particular about how they would craft that restriction with the master plan.
Would it be possible to craft and allow use for this purpose under the current zoning?
No.
Okay.
High-end and luxury are not terms that we can define in zoning.
Neither in my business either, unfortunately.
Well, if there are no other questions, we'll see this item back in a couple of weeks and we'll move on. Is there any other business we need to cover? Bill, Josh?
No, I just want to mention a couple of things. I want to remind the board members, when you are making motions usually you're adopting the resolution that we present before you, and it includes general conditions and or usually always conditions, but it also has and I'm not sure if you can hear me now because it seems to be locking up. So
We can hear you again now, but we lost you about halfway through your comment. If you restate that.
what I want to say is that when you are making a motion to not accept a resolution that we put before you, you need to be specific and make findings of fact as to why you are making the decision that you're making with that alternative motion. That's not the one that we present. We usually have one that includes specific findings and or general findings tied to the resolution. So if you're going to be recommending something other than what the resolution is, you need to make specific findings of fact. And then again, should be based on facts and not necessarily hearsay. So I just want to remind you of that. We will be that will be in concert with changing over from a regional municipal planning commission to just a municipal planning commission.
Bill, could I ask you to repeat? You said we will be, and then it cut out.
We will be presenting new bylaws for consideration. We'll probably provide those in draft form April, and then you'll consider them in May. So that's going to be sent off to the local government planning advisory committee for their action in April, and I assume that they're going to approve that. But in the meantime, we'll have an opportunity for you to take those home, if you will, and look them over for a couple of weeks, 2, maybe 4 weeks, and add or take from those bylaws. And that'd be, I guess, all that we have.
Next slide, please, Dustin.
Oh.
So before he gets misty-eyed, the Planning Commission meeting on April 26th will be the retirement ceremony for Dr. Orgain, and the mayor brought it to my attention that we have also never recognized Mr. James Robert Ramsey for his decades of dedication and service to the city. So we will be presenting, the mayor will that'll be the 26th.
Josh, let me take you, rewind. You got to the mayor will, and you're talking about recognizing Dr. Gain and James Robert Ramsey.
Yes.
Yeah, you were cut off. It garbled. So you said the mayor will do what?
Present both Dr. Orgain and Mr. Ramsey with a small token of the devotion and dedication of the city, and a hearty thanks from all of us.
Very good. Thank you, Dr. Orgain.
It makes me feel better already.
That's a Laurel and Hardy, thanks.
So you know, Dr. Orgain, that just frees you up to serve on other appointed committees throughout the city and county now.
Yeah, you know, maybe I'll look forward to it and maybe I won't.
If I would like to mention, if y'all saw an email that went out, there was a seminar, a webinar by Sam Edwards at the TAPA conference. I really encourage you to watch it. I've seen a lot of his or listened to a lot of his talks, slept through a few of them, but this one was really good. And I encourage y'all to take the time to watch it. Latasha sent y'all the link, or the staff sent out the link where it's recorded, and you can watch it at your leisure.
We keep locking up. I think we ought to call it a night.
Am I locking up too? That's telling me to go home. All right.
Good night, everyone.
If there's nothing else.
Okay.
Thank y'all.
See you.
Good night.
Good night.